Hey, I hope you're doing well. My name's Jake. I'm a big fan of making music, and sometimes I'm just blown away by the number of chord choices that I have when I'm working on a song. Any three notes played together are going to make a chord, but there's a lot of options for putting three notes together. And it doesn't just end there. I mean, you could have a chord with four notes, you could have a chord with five or six notes. All of these are going to have different sonic qualities, but it's a lot of options, and it's hard for me to figure out sometimes, like, am I going to use this chord, am I going to use that chord, how do I parse through my options? Somewhere along the way, someone pointed out to me that there's actually really three types of chords. There's a lot of chords out there, but you can kind of put them into three different categories. And that really helps me boil it down as I'm like working on something. Now, technically speaking, these categories are tonic, subdominant, and dominant chords. But those names really do nothing for me to understand what do they sound like, when am I going to use one over the other. So I like to think about it with a little bit of a story. Picture you move away from the city and you go live out in the middle of the woods in a little home. It can be whatever, floats your boat. But for me, I like to think about a little, tiny, room. It's got everything I need to do all my cooking and make some tea, a nice cozy place to sleep, a place where I feel safe and I feel like, nothing can get to me. It's sort of like the ultimate place of rest, if you will, right? That's home. Right. And so that's kind of, the center of it all, and the sort of the center of how we want to think about this. Then, say the first morning I'm there, I walk out the door, I see a path, and it goes down the hill to a lake. The lake is a really beautiful place. There's a lot of wildlife, there's plants, maybe someone way off in the distance is in a canoe or they're fishing or something like that. It's a place where I feel like, okay, yeah, I could hang out here for a while. Like, this is calm, this is relaxing. And yet at the end of the day, it's not home, right? So I go back home at the end of the day, I put my feet up and, I start the day anew. And then that second day, I look outside, there's another trail, and I take that trail all the way up a mountain. It's this big, beautiful mountain. It's a journey. There's a lot of hardship along the way. I'm short of breath. I'm climbing. I'm seeing all these wonderful things along the way. And at the end of the hike, I get to the top of the mountain, and I'm just blown away. I look over here. I see, all the villages on the other side of the mountain. I look over here. I see my home. I see, my neighbor's home. And it's really like majestic and grandiose. And yet at the same time, it's a little nerve-wracking to be up on top of that mountain, right? It dawns on me like, wait a second, I could fall. This is hardly a place I want to stay for too long. And so I make my way back down the mountain. And, again, I go home. I go back to the place where I can be at ultimate peace and serenity. This is kind of the three categories of chords that I'm thinking about. And it's a little silly to think about it this way. But let me grab a guitar and show you what I mean. All right, so I've got my guitar here with me now, and let's just pick a key to work in. I don't know, G major. Here are the notes of the G major scale. I could make a chord off of each one of those notes. So that you do that by stacking thirds, right? You skip a note, you play the next one, you skip a note, and that sounds like this. And I'll just walk you through the chord names. There are G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D7, E minor, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, and G. So how do I know which chord is going to be the home chord? Well, that's the whole point of a key. When I'm in the key of G, G is home. We've already heard a little bit of G going on in this video from playing the scale, playing through all the chords. And that feels like home, right? I could play this chord all day long. But music is, of course, more than just staying home all day. You know, that feeling when you're staying home, and it's like, oh man, I just got to go do something. I got to run the errands or, call a friend and go out on the town. The purpose of music is to take us on that journey. And we understand the journey by looking at where is home, where can we go that's not home, and how do we then come back home? The most critical notes in the G chord are the G, obviously, but also the B, right? Because that B tells me not only is it a G chord, but it's a G major chord. Even just playing those two notes gives me the idea of a G major chord. So when I think about how do I get to something that sounds different from that, really the trick of it is to find the chords that would rub against that not so nicely. So if I'm on G and I go up 4 scale steps, so G being the first scale step, and then I go A, B, C. C is like a 4th up, as we say, right? So a C is not in a G major chord by any stretch. And in fact, it's really close to the B that we were just talking about a second ago, sort of one of the fundamental notes in my home chord. So anytime I hear that C in the key of G, it doesn't feel like I'm home anymore. We've deviated ever so slightly away from the home chord. And so this is what they would call a subdominant chord. Or as we're talking about it in our metaphor here, you could call it like a chord of the lake, a lakeside chord or something like that. If I make a chord starting with C, it would be C, E, and G. And it's really nice. It's really relaxing. It doesn't feel like home. So let me just play back and forth between G and C. And that way you can get a feel for, what does the subdominant chord actually feel like? What does it feel like to go away from home to somewhere relaxing, but somewhere that ultimately is not home? Now, all of a sudden, it's really starting to sound like a song. There's this sort of push and pull between your home base, somewhere else, going back home. But C is not the only subdominant chord in the key. Really, any chord that has that magic note, that C in it, is going to have that subdominant vibe. It's going to have that sort of same feeling of being in this place that's away from home. Another example from the key of G is the A minor chord. That's spelled by playing an A, a C, and an E. And you can hear that it sounds similar to the C chord. In the context of this key, they're almost interchangeable. So let me just do that same progression, but instead of playing the C chord, I'll play the A minor chord. And so it's really, again, it's just a similar vibe. It's a little bit more somber because I'm using a minor chord instead of a major chord. But it's kind of that same vibe. And so then we've got our home chords established. We've got the chords that sort of feel like you're by the lake established. What does it mean to sort of go up to the mountain as we're talking about in this example? Well, we walked up from G 4 steps to get that magic note, the C. And the mountain is in the other direction. We walk down from G to find, this new territory of chords. So we've got G, then F sharp, then E, then D. And if I made a chord on D, that's our dominant chord. D major, or if you put the 7th in there, it would be D7. This is the dominant chord that's, as they say, diatonic to G. It just means using the notes in the G major scale. This is the one. And so what does it sound like to sort of go between G and D? And how does that feel a little different? Let's just take a quick listen. And so hopefully you can hear, like, it has a similar push and pull. You know, D is definitely not home bass. When you hear that D chord, all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is great. It's powerful. It's elevated. It's not home. And if I was to just stay on D, stay here for a while, and you just stop abruptly like that, I mean, your ear is just thinking, come on, man, take me home, take me back to the G chord. And so these are kind of the building blocks of how we think about chords. And the nice thing is that in music, there are no rules as to when we go from one to the other. There are entire songs that don't even play the home chord. They might just go back and forth between a subdominant chord and a dominant chord. You know, it sounds something like this in the key of G. And you can hear with that progression, because we're sort of still centered in the key of G, just playing C and D back and forth, there is like a lot of tension. It keeps the song moving. It keeps it going back and forth. You could swap in the A minor for the C in that same progression and get a similar vibe, but it's a little different. And so it's really up to us as musicians to kind of pick and choose and make some decisions about, you know, what chords do we want to use to kind of create that movement by going from a tonic chord, a home bass chord, maybe going over to a subdominant chord and staying there for a minute, coming back to the tonic chord, throwing in these dominant chords to kind of create that momentum to bring us back home. I'll just take you out on a progression that kind of uses these chords in different combinations, just to kind of give you an example of how you might weave these decisions into a larger phrase. So hopefully that kind of paints a picture of how, yes, there are a lot of chords, but at the end of the day, there's really three types of categories that you can pick and choose from. You can mix and match chords that are in that same category almost interchangeably, and that lets you, mix up the song as you move along so that you're not just doing the same thing over and over again. If you liked this video, just please hit the thumbs up. It goes a long way to helping me grow the channel and get that feedback on what you guys are into. If you got any ideas about specific topics you want to see me talk about, just drop a comment below. I'd love to check that out and use that to figure out what video is going to be coming next. That's it for this one, and hey, until next time, let's get out there and make some music.